Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. It's Terry, your host. So yesterday I talked about Iowa football. Let me just say this real quick. I just checked. Iowa is installed as a 24-point favorite. Now they are playing at home today against Nevada. 24-point favorite. I don't think they can score 24 even if Nevada doesn't show up in Iowa City. And the over-under is 39.5. Here's what my advice is. Here's the betting line, the Tim Travels betting advice. Take the points, take Nevada, and take the under. Because I think Iowa's defense can hold Nevada to very few points, but I don't think Iowa's offense is going to score very few. I mean, if it ended up 11 or 12 to 3, I would not be shocked. So, like I said, I don't, because Iowa has to score 25 points just to cover. That's if the defense pitches a shutout. I just don't. I have no idea after the last 2 weeks why any odds maker would make Iowa a 24-point favorite. I got nothing. I mean, unless the fix is in with the Nevada defense. Now they are from Nevada, so who knows, right? But I mean, I just cannot imagine them covering. I'm happy to be proved wrong, but I just can't imagine it. Anyway, so that's that. Today is the 17th of September. There are this is the anniversary of a couple of really important historic events. The first one is, this is the 160th anniversary of the bloodiest day in U.S. history, and that was the Battle of Antietam, which happened in and around Sharpsburg, Maryland, Washington County, Maryland. Army of Northern Virginia, headed up by Robert E. Lee. Army of the Potomac, headed up by George Brinton McClellan. And there's a lot to this battle. I've talked about it in the past. I did a little video on a visit I did to the battlefield with my co-driver Paul a few months ago. But one of the things that is kind of intriguing about this, and I'll just bring this up, is why did it take so long for Ambrose Burnside to get his Union 9th Corps into action on the Union left the day of the battle? And the reason that this has always kind of been of interest, and there has been a lot of revisionist history, mostly from McClellan himself after the fact. The reason this has been of interest is because had Burnside's 9th Corps actually forded and crossed, because you've heard of Burnside's Bridge. Well, back then it was actually the Rohrbach Bridge. But had they gotten across the bridge and forded Antietam Creek, and there were 2 fords that were really not that far away. One was called Snavely's Ford, and another was just a ford that was kind of known. But had they gotten across the creek, it's likely that they had the numbers. It's very likely that they had the numbers to turn the Confederate right. And the high ground right near Burnside's Bridge was defended, but it was not defended by a lot of Confederates. They did have a superior position, and they could shoot down on the people that were trying to cross. But the thing was, they were within rifle range of the men on the opposite side of the creek. Now, ultimately, what happened is the 51st Pennsylvania and the 54th New York infantry regiments got across the bridge. But they did so about 5.5 hours after McClellan's dispatch, or actually his order, to Burnside reached Burnside's hands. Burnside just pissed away the day. And the reason that this delay was such a huge deal, even if he'd have done it an hour earlier than he had, even if it took 4 hours or 4.5 hours instead of 5.5, there's a good chance that the Union Army would have had a much more significant military victory at Antietam. Now, Antietam is seen as a Union victory, and it did give Lincoln the political capital to. Sorry, I'm going to plug my phone in since I got a low power alarm. It did give Lincoln the political capital to, issue the Emancipation Proclamation, which I've talked about before. But the military victory was kind of iffy. The Confederates were able, what happened was A.P. Hill, Confederate General A.P. Hill, Ambrose Powell Hill, he marched his entire division like 30 miles in a few hours, like 5 hours, right? He gets to the battlefield late in the day in just enough time to counterattack the Union troops that had finally started streaming across Antietam Creek. He gets there in time to counterattack and blunt the Union attack on the Confederate right. Had they gotten across there an hour earlier and just done the same stuff they did, but without A.P. Hill's division reinforcing the Confederate position, there's a very good chance that the victory could have been extremely consequential. It might have even been a victory that was so overwhelming as to really shorten the war. The Battle of Gettysburg may not have been the high tide of the Confederacy if Burnside gets his corps in gear a few hours earlier. Now, certainly McClellan bears a lot of the responsibility for this screw-up, right? He's the general in charge. And McClellan was famously known for not getting in the fight, even when he had superior numbers. And McClellan's initial report on the battle doesn't come out until early 1863. So keep in mind, we're talking the battles in the middle of September 1862. McClellan gets fired by December of 1862. Burnside, who is the most reluctant of commanders, has been made the commanding general of the Army of the Potomac. He acquits himself very poorly at Fredericksburg, which is a substantial Confederate victory. It's a hell of a Union defeat in December of 1862, Fredericksburg, Virginia, right? McClellan writes his report, and he casts a lot of the blame for not achieving overwhelming military victory at Antietam on Burnside. Later on in life, and by the way, McClellan was, they called him Little Napoleon, but McClellan was so enamored with himself that the things he said and did were borderline. He was certainly ambitious. I don't want to say they were treasonous, but they didn't necessarily help the war effort of the Union. And you may know this, but McClellan ended up leaving the Army and running as the Copperhead candidate in 1864 against Abraham Lincoln. So, put your head around this. He's the commanding general of the most important military unit in the Union in September of 1862. Less than 2 years later, he's running against the guy that was the commander-in-chief. And while a war's still going on, that he didn't do very much to hasten the end of. Now, obviously, Lincoln defeats him. The Confederacy surrenders a few months later in April of 1865. So anyway, that's a controversy. And then McClellan does a lot of revisionist history after 1881. Now, why does that matter? Well, of course, Lincoln was dead. But also, who was dead? Burnside. He died in 1881. But McClellan was ever the self-serving, megalomaniac. I'm not fond of McClellan at all. But anyway, that's a little bit about the Battle of Antietam on this date 160 years ago. But on this date 21 years ago, something very sad happened also. And that was Lou Dog died. He was actually put to sleep because he was old. But if you don't know who Lou Dog was, well, you're no fan of Sublime. So Lou Dog was Bradley's dog, and Lou Dog, just to know, like, they did an EP after Bradley died of an overdose. Bradley was lead singer, of course, and you know, they're famous. Their eponymous third album was released after his death, right? They never tour, they never support it. It just goes crazy on the radio and everything. But anyway, if you know the song What I Got, Lou Dog, who was a Dalmatian, is mentioned in there. Like, there's 3 different references to him. And I said something about, like, I said, I don't, you know, I mentioned one of the lyrics quite a while ago about I don't cry when my dog runs away. Well, that's Lou Dog ran away one time. But Lou Dog was often, if you go back and onto YouTube and look up any Sublime videos from when they were together and performing, oftentimes Lou Dog is on stage, and sometimes he would even like bite people and stuff. But also, here's the other crazy thing: Lou Dog was deaf. So anyway, and he lived out his life with the band's manager after Bradley passed away. But yeah, so Lou Dog put down on September 17th, 2001. Okay, so the subject for today is, why isn't Terry a lawyer anymore? And I discussed this in a video I called What's a Nice Lawyer Doing in Working for a Trucking Company or something like that. And I did that, I don't know, a while ago. But so let me just talk about this, because somebody asked a question just like yesterday or today. And it, you know, and I think it's an important question for me to answer, not because it's really about me, but it's more about like philosophy of, you know, what do you do with your life? How do you, you know, get from A to B? How do you make a living, put food on the table, whatever you want to say? So let me back up and say, and I don't want to go into all the details, but essentially, I was coming to the end of my career in the Navy, or it might be more accurate to say that I decided that I wanted my career to end. Now, I could have stayed past when I did, but I had young kids, and I no longer wanted to, you know, go overseas and everything. Now, mind you, this is 2001 we're talking. So I had decided a couple of years earlier that I was just gonna, you know, retire and, you know, not deploy and stuff like that. And the other thing I have to say is that, you know, before 9/11, you know, the Navy has always done what the Navy does. So, and what I mean by that is that the Navy always deploys. Units always deploy. They're always deployed around the world, out at sea, doing operations. It doesn't matter whether you're in a squadron or a SEAL platoon or an EOD DAT, or you're on an aircraft carrier, submarine, destroyer. It doesn't matter. The Navy deploys. Even our shore-based, like VP squadrons, like anti-submarine squad, land-based anti-submarine aircraft, they would send some of their aircraft to overseas bases to operate for a few months at a time. So the Navy was always constantly deploying. It wasn't like the Army or, you know, and I should say, when the Navy deployed, like an amphibious ready group, the Marines were with them too. So the Marines were, you know, the Marines call it going on a float. But that's what the Navy and Marine Corps have always done, at least since I was cognizant of any of that. And so the Army and the Air Force, not so much. okay? And certainly not where they had, you know, entire divisions or brigade combat teams, you know, forward-based in Afghanistan, Iraq, or whatever. But the Navy always deployed. And so I was just like, I didn't know that, you know, planes were going to crash into the World Trade Center. But I still knew that no matter whether that happened or not, I was going to be going back overseas all the time. So I just decided I was done. And I was in a good place in terms of where to retire from. Like sometimes guys retire and they're on a ship and they get back from deployment, or they're in a team or a squadron or whatever, they get back from deployment, then they just got to quickly wrap up their career, so to speak, and, you know, then it's out the door. I was in a really good position, and I sort of kind of planned it this way, but I was not only on shore duty, but I was on shore duty on the staff of the Naval Academy. And so the Naval Academy allowed me to, you know, meet lots of people that I might not have run into in other circles, and it allowed me to pursue outside education. And I was working on my bachelor's degree, and my goal was to finish my bachelor's, and then I was like, well, what do I want to do? And I got to be candid and say that part of me, I always wanted to like prove myself, and you know, I was in an academic environment, and everybody there is really smart, and it probably was, you know, some, I don't know, inferiority complex on my part, notwithstanding that I was, notwithstanding that I was in a very, very elite position. I don't want to say elite unit, but what I did at the Naval Academy, there's only 24 people in the entire U.S. Navy that do that at any one time. Only 24. And everybody's handpicked and has to go through several different selection criteria, like, and I'm sure this is true in all branches of service, but the Navy says, oh, well, if you're going to be a recruit company commander, you have to meet all these requirements. If you're going to be a recruiter, you got to meet all these requirements. If you're going to be at the ceremonial guard in DC, you need to meet all these requirements. If you're going to be on a flag staff, you need to meet all these. And if you're going to be an instructor, you get the picture, right? But at that command, on the staff of the commandant and midshipman at the Naval Academy, you had to have several of those screenings. So flag duty, flag screening. Then they added recruit company commander as well as like instructor. So you had to have a lot of arrows in your quiver. You had to be good at what you did. And there were people of those 24 guys. There was always a couple of guys that were SEALs. There were some guys from sub community. There were surface guys. There were Airedales. There were Seabees. So all the communities that enlisted people are in, senior enlisted people in the military, or in the Navy I don't want to say the best and brightest because that sounds a little conceited, but people that were pretty sharp at pretty good at their jobs, they fed into that 24 sailors. And then we had 30 companies, so the other 6 billets were filled by senior Marines, usually gunnery sergeants and above, although we did have a female Marine, and she came as a staff sergeant, and then she made gunnery sergeant while she was there. So again, really sharp people with lots of experience in operationally. So, but I was in that environment, and I was like, oh, college is cool, and I had a cool job, and I was like, and I said to my wife, I said, well, I still wanted to do something, challenging when I got out of when I retired. So my first thought was to be a foreign service officer. And then, and I had some friends that were professors at the academy, because I thought about doing like getting a PhD in English and maybe being a professor or something somewhere. And believe it or not, I had a friend that was a history professor and a friend that was an English professor, and they both kind of dissuaded me from going into academia. They're like, look, like I had one professor, the guy that was a history professor, a guy named Richard Abel. He said, look, I got my PhD at Columbia. I mean, he was a super smart guy. He specialized in like medieval history. And he says, I got my PhD at Columbia and I only got 2 job offers. The Naval Academy and one other college, and and it wasn't like it was Harvard or anything where he got an offer. And he goes, I took the job at the Naval Academy, even though I'd never been in the military. I felt like I could work with, in this environment. And so they both kind of dissuaded me from getting a PhD and trying to survive as a, like they like to say, a poor doctor, as opposed to a rich doctor who's an MD. So I kind of narrowed it down to law or being a foreign service officer. But one of the things, so I had a conversation with my wife, and one of the things that came up in the foreign service stuff was, you might be posted to a country where dependents don't have access to great health care. I had a young family, had 3 kids, all of them under 10. And, but there's some diplomats where, like, if you're posted to, like, the Central African Republic or whatever, to Congo, they might say, hey, your child needs an appendectomy, but we're going to fly them, we're going to put them on a medevac to Germany. And so, the wife would go with or whatever, but then, you know what I'm saying? It was like, you could be in a place where it wasn't great in terms of needing things that we expect in the West. So my wife's like, yeah, go to law school. So I ended up going to law school. I didn't get my bachelor's degree. I got into law school at University of Maryland on a program that allowed you to have, there's a couple of law schools, University of Chicago, University of Maryland, you can get in without a bachelor's. That's the long story short. So I get in, I graduate, and I started practicing. And I won't get into all the different things that I did, but I had a civil practice, commercial, corporate law, and represented a lot of household names, banks, other credit, everything from, I represented a company that owns Cannondale and Raleigh Bikes. I've represented Broadcast Music International. So, when you're on hold with Prime, that music you hear in the background, that's licensed from BMI. I represented them. I've represented Bank of America, Citibank, Chrysler Motor Credit, all sorts of mortgage lenders. I've done, lots of different stuff. But the truth of the matter is that I never, even though I've rubbed elbows with I've rubbed elbows with people that are, very well known, people that you'll see on TV. I've rubbed elbows with people that are very, 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 very wealthy. Had lunch with them, done all sorts of, kind of cool stuff. But I just never loved it. I never loved practicing law. And even when I was making bank, there was just always more and more pressure. And so what happened is so fast forward, I graduated from law school in 2002. There's a recession, but I'm kind of entrepreneurial, so I just tried to start making things work. And I caught a few breaks along the way, and people liked me, and either took me under their wing or fed me business. And a lot of being a lawyer is about glad handing and being seen and networking and stuff. And I actually was pretty decent at that. I was pretty good at finding work for the most part. But then, so fast forward from 2002 until like 2016, 2017. Well, by 2016, my partner and I had a pretty successful firm, but we lost our biggest client. And we lost our biggest client, notwithstanding our efforts to really, really try and diversify. We lost our biggest client because it's a long story, but basically there was about $1 billion hedge fund that was underwriting and financing a lot of what our biggest client was doing. But I think that the hedge fund was not seeing the results from their investment in our client that they expected. They weren't seeing the ROI, return on investment. And they kind of found some pretext, and I don't want to get into it too much, but they found some pretext to basically sever the relationship. And of course, when they severed that relationship, then it hurt our client's business immensely. And the writing was on the wall. It was just like, then we were just winding down that engagement. But we had put a lot of eggs into one basket. And, you know, I kind of knew that would happen at some point. But, you know, so we kind of wound our firm down, because we didn't have the visibility to really see how we were going to move forward in the way we were structured and everything. But I wasn't too worried, and you know, I knew a lot of people, and people had given me job offers, and so you know, I met with some people, and I took a job at a firm where I knew the guy that was the managing partner. I didn't know him well, but I knew him, and I was good friends with one of his a guy that was of counsel at that firm. And this firm had about 10 lawyers, I would guess, at the time. But I also knew that the firm was going through a merger, and they were basically being bought out. The guy that was managing partner, he held all the equity. He was being bought out by this bigger firm. And the bigger firm was what I would classify as a mill, meaning they do one kind of work, and they're just like, you know, they use a lot of non-lawyers, they leverage technology, and you know, they have clients where they have tons and tons and tons of files, tons of cases, and these guys wanted to expand into the DMV, into Maryland, District of Columbia, and Virginia, which is where my firm practiced. So you know, about a year goes by. So I started there in 2017 in the summer. About a year goes by, and I get called into a meeting with the bean counter from the firm that's taking over. And they were based in New Jersey. And this guy is, you know, I mean, I think I'm being charitable when I just call him a frat boy. He was probably, you know, so by this time I was, let me see, you know, I was probably like 55 years old at the time, and this guy's like, you know, 25 years younger than me. And you know, he was like, oh well, you know, you don't touch these files as much as, you know, you're not touching these files enough, blah blah blah. Well, the thing is that I took all the tough cases, right? I took all the one-off cases that nobody else wanted. I took appeals, and the clients were happy with me. I would have clients would be like, oh, you know, that's a great strategy. No one's ever proposed doing stuff like that. Or I would have people like from these banks, like they're, you know, vice presidents. They're not like they're not in the C-suite, but you know, they're like VPs, regional VPs, and we'd go to court, and they, you know, I'd win the case, and they'd be like, oh, you did a great job, you know, blah blah blah, appreciate it, you know, and so this, you know, I was like, look, the clients are happy with me, I win my cases, I don't know what the issue is. Now, maybe the issue was they thought they could get the same performance for less money, but they knew I wasn't going to take less money. Not that they were paying me a lot. I actually make more now. I was making a ton more in my own practice. But this job, I was just like a worker bee, but with experience and, kind of a specialty or whatever. And I had my own side book of business and stuff. So, the managing partner, like after this meeting, he's like, hey, Terry, you didn't really acquit yourself very well. I thought you would have done better with this. And I'm like, his name was Mitch. I was like, Mitch, what do you want me to say? I said, I'm not going to go in there and like shine this guy on. I am what I am. I'm probably not going to change. I do my job. I get good results. I don't cause anybody any heartburn. The clients are happy with me. So, and the bean counter guy was not a lawyer. He was like some freaking, I'm sure he wasn't even a CPA. He might have had a degree in business or marketing or some generic thing. But anyway, I said, I don't know what you want me to say. I'm not going to sit there and like, I'm not going to really like beg him for a job or defend myself. My results speak for themselves. Whether or not I'm clicking, typing stuff in, like I called somebody for the 40th time this week to try to get them to pay their, to pay their credit card. I said, that's just, that's disingenuous, if you ask me. And he's like, all right, well, I'll talk to him, So I'm like, okay, cool. So, that was on a Tuesday. And so on Wednesday, I talked to him. He's like, all right, I talked to so-and-so who was actually like a lawyer at this firm, and we're good. So that was a Wednesday. So Thursday, we always had an attorney meeting. And, we had our normal attorney meeting, and we get all the attorneys in the conference room or the managing partner's office or whatever. And we all brought our calendars, and we had a trial calendar. We had all the cases that were coming up in all the different jurisdictions, and we basically said, okay, who's gonna appear at what court on what days? Do we need witnesses from our clients to testify? What do we need to do? Are we waiting on discovery? Is there this issue, that issue, whatever it is, right? And so that was Thursday, and I was on the trial calendar. We usually went out about 6 weeks, right? I was on a trial calendar. I had some vacation scheduled. This was in June of 2018. I had vacation scheduled later in the summer. So Friday morning, I have court in Prince George's County, Maryland. I appeared in both the district and the circuit court down there. And I finally get back to my office in Montgomery County about 2 o'clock. So I get back in my office, I get an email from my boss, and he's like, hey, are you coming back to the office today? And, I had already received the assurances earlier in the week. I'd been to the meeting, so I didn't think anything of it. I'm like, yeah, I'm back. He's like, oh, well, can you come see me? So I go down there, excuse me. I go down to his office. I walk in, he's like, I don't have good news. I said, oh. He goes, yeah, this is going to be your last day. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to go, I got some clothes in my car. I said, why don't I go get changed, and then I can then I don't have to carry all my stuff out in my suit and everything. I said, is that okay? He's like, yeah, take your time. He goes, you know what, Terry, I really appreciate you handling this like a gentleman. And it was funny to me because I was like, this is exactly what I said. I said, Mitch, I said, what'd you expect me to do? Shoot the place up? I said, I was in the Navy, not the Postal Service. And he's like, well, I just really appreciate it. So I packed up my shit, said goodbye to people, and off I went. Well, I didn't really have a place to land, because obviously it happened that fast, right? I didn't really have a place to land, but I wasn't panicked. And I had started this idea, actually started hauling some stuff in my Sprinter van. And I originally started that idea and started trying to put together that little business because I was hoping that I could train one of my sons to do it, because he has some cognitive delay. And I thought, you know what, he'll be able to do this with some help. You know, and so what I did is I had already had this business like started. It was kind of like tiny steps. So all I did, it was just magnified it. I was like, okay, I'm going full bore and I'm going to do this. And I immediately started getting business off of UShip and stuff like that. But then I became kind of a known quantity among antique dealers, and I hauled stuff for movie props, like property management, like big productions, like stuff that Seth Rogen was in, and I hauled like really, really expensive antiques, like really valuable stuff, artwork, restored neon signs, stuff that people pay huge money for. And I used to get paid like enormous amounts of money to haul like very tiny things. Like one time I got paid $500 to bring some bowls to Nashville from DC. Like they just sat in the front seat of my van and I filled up the van with other stuff. I had regular customers. I had custom furniture builders. They'd be like, Terry, can you go to, St. Louis? Terry, can you go to Miami? I had constant movement, but I was kind of not doing it in the most efficient and effective way. And I was, I really wasn't completely set up to do what I was doing, and do it with my Sprinter. And so, I was putting a lot of miles on my Sprinter, but I wasn't as effective as I needed to be. I just, but I was making some money. And the nice thing was, almost all of it was cash. Like, people didn't even know my name. And a lot of times they would just, it was a cash business. It really was. Like, people, I remember I hauled a table out to Wyoming, and the lady was like, how much? And I said $850. And when I got close, I was, I had my son with me, and I was like, she's like, do you want cash or a check? And I said, cash is king. And I remember she just gave me $1,000 cash because it was around the holidays. She's like, Merry Christmas. She was happy to get her table, and I got $1,000 out of it. And so there, and I got to go to interesting places. Like, I delivered stuff to the Philadelphia Museum of Art, like some cool coat racks and stuff that were like, they were vintage, they weren't antiques, but I got to go to cool places and Beverly Hills and delivering stuff to, like, I delivered at the Watergate Hotel, the Watergate Apartments in DC. Yeah, that Watergate. And people were, a lot of times, it's kind of funny, a lot of the seriously wealthy people were quite nice. It was the people that were not seriously wealthy that acted like I was the help. One of the snottiest people was a lady in Pittsburgh that was a school teacher, and it just cracked me up. But so that's how I got in this. And then my wife's like, well, why don't you get a CDL? And just, so that's how I got into trucking. But let me, I've talked for a while about this, but let me just wrap up by saying this. I think there are a lot of people in America, and this is an American problem more than it is a global problem, but a lot of people in America put the worth of a human being, they base the worth of a human being on what that person does for a job. But I've always been taught that any kind of honest work is honorable. And the funny thing is, I make more money driving a truck, and I have for a while now, than I was making at my last law job. And here's the other little secret about the law. Yeah, there are a lot of lawyers that make $1 million a year or $2 million or whatever. They're superstars, and they're not household names. They're not the people you see on CNN or something, although the Mark Garagoses of the world are making bank too. But these are people that are partners in the bankruptcy practice or tax law, or but they might have huge clients, like their client might be like Lockheed Martin. So, you know, and they make bank. But a lot of lawyers just toil away in unhappy circumstances for not a lot of money. I used to see prosecuting attorneys, like assistant state's attorneys in Maryland. I would see how some of them showed up dressed for court. Like, their shoes were all worn out. They had these freaking threadbare suits and stuff. And I mean, I would have never gone to court looking like that. But I just think it was because they're only making like $48 a year or whatever. I mean, I mentored a guy that worked for the state's attorney, and he actually, this was so jacked up, just to get a job, he basically had to intern for free, you know? And a lot of people pay a lot of dues in the legal profession, and just in hopes that it'll pay off. And other people, you know, they're more entrepreneurial and stuff, and they might make more money, but a lot of times it's feast or famine. And I know that one thing that's always made my wife happy, and by the way, you know, I've had latitude because I've always had health insurance, always, you know, like my whole life basically had health insurance. My family has had health insurance because of the military, and I have a pension. So I was able to do things other lawyers, you know, I had at least a little bit of a safety net that a lot of people don't have. But it's not that prestigious a job. It's just a job that requires a coat and tie and a bunch of school that a lot of people go in a lot of debt for. And, you know, if I had it to do all over again, candidly, I probably would have gotten just finished my bachelor's, and maybe I'd have been a school teacher or something, and I would have just lived, I would have lived in a smaller house and bought less vehicles and not had as many suits and ties and French cuff shirts and $350 pairs of Allen Edmonds that are all sitting in my closet. I think they're actually under my bed. I mean, I have like 10 pair of dress shoes that, you know, are $300+ pairs of dress shoes. I mean, it just came with the territory. I don't regret it, but I think I probably, in my post-Navy years, would have been happier with a different career. And that's one thing I can say about driving a truck. There are days where it's kind of a pain in the butt, like I'm here sitting at Tyson when I was supposed to have a drop and hook, but we all know what Tyson stands for. Trucker, you're staying overnight. But I'm happy doing what I'm doing. Every once in a while I'll drive down a road, like if I'm in the Maryland, you know, I'm driving near DC or Baltimore or whatever, I'll drive down a road that I used to take to go to court. And I'll be like, man, I would start getting like anxious on Sunday nights. And that anxiousness would not subside until after I was done on Friday. You know, I would just be anticipating the week that I was going to have. And, you know, and sometimes I would just be so happy that a case settled, that I didn't have to go deal with some asshole judge and sit in a courtroom for 2 hours waiting for my case to be called. Or, there's a million things I don't miss. And the prestige of the job, I don't miss that either. And so don't let anybody tell you that if you're happy doing what you're doing and you feel like you're being compensated fairly, doesn't matter what anybody else thinks, right? Just be grateful for that, and enjoy what you're doing, and don't worry about what anybody thinks of your job. It's the end of Trucker Appreciation Week, and the coolest thing about it is I don't think anybody really appreciated me that much this week, but I don't really care. I don't really care. Like I had some hassles with the security guards at the delivery I made earlier today. but you know, that was nothing compared to some of the stuff that I did as an attorney. And you know, the thing is about the security guards, if I want to just drive away, I can. You know, like when a judge is being a jackass, you can't really walk away. And it's not like you see in the on TV. You know, if you start getting loud, you're probably going to end up in handcuffs. Like, you don't get to like swear and spit at judges normally. But anyway, I don't know if that answers the question, but you know, like I said, I think people put too much value on human beings based on what those human beings do for a living, and that's just, it's really misguided. It's really misguided, and it really is, candidly, not to get preachy, but it's anti-Christian, and it's probably anti every religion. You know, the scriptures say God is no respecter of persons. And I think if you're familiar enough with the Bible, you know that, you know, Christ told the rich guy, you can't buy your way into heaven. So again, not to be preachy, but that's just kind of my philosophy. Like, I know a lot of people that are practicing attorneys and they really don't like it, but they're kind of just stuck. In fact, and I'll just wrap up with this just to give you a little sense of this. I have a good friend who was a classmate of mine in law school, and she's a partner at a law firm in Georgia. And I was down in Athens for a delivery when I still was doing stuff with my Sprinter, and I was like, hey, you know, what are you up to? You want to grab some lunch or whatever? And she was like, oh, I want to hear all about what you're doing, you know, because she was like, are you in town, or, you know, on business or whatever? And I said, oh, I got to explain this. I'm living in my van, but not down by the river. And her comment to me, and it stuck with me, is she's like, man, this is awesome. You got out. As if the profession of law is like a jail cell, like it's a prison sentence. Now, she's still practicing, and she's you know, very good at it. But I think there's something about what she said. And you know, so anyway, I hope that answers the question. You know, and I hope people feel empowered. You know, if you're doing something you hate, even if it's okay, even if it's good money, right? The money isn't that good if you hate it. And because I've been in that position. I've been in the position where I had a job one time, and I was like a stress case the entire time. My stomach was in knots every day about something, and I was making huge money. Like, I had $50,000 bonus for Christmas and stuff. You know, money was no object at that particular job, yet I wasn't happy. So, go figure, right? Who knew that driving a truck was so relaxing? Anyway, I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching.